remembering the God within. You were not born ordinary. You were not born limited, small, or powerless. You came into this world as infinite potential, as consciousness wrapped in form, carrying the memory of eternity in every cell. And yet, the very moment your eyes opened, a system was already waiting, carefully designed to make you forget. You didn't need chains, you only needed amnesia. If this resonates with you already, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this with one person who's ready to remember. The most effective control is never loud. It doesn't march in with shackles and whips. It whispers. It hides behind rules no one dares to question, beliefs handed down without evidence, dreams chosen for you long before you could imagine your own. From the very beginning, the infinite inside you was reduced, reshaped into something small, manageable, compliant. You were taught how to be acceptable, how to stay inside invisible boundaries, how to confuse obedience with safety. And yet beneath all that conditioning, there was always a hum, a vibration pressing against the edges of your awareness, a subtle pressure that whispered, "This life is not what it seems, and you are far more than you were told." This isn't about introducing a new philosophy, another doctrine, or another set of rules. It is about tearing the curtain down and showing you what was hidden in plain sight. What we offer is not new information. It is memory. It is a reminder of what your deepest self has always known. The God within you is not a metaphor, not a symbol, not a poetic idea. It is reality. It is presence. And it is time to wake it up. The forgetting was never your fault. You were open, curious, absorbent. They knew that. That is why the programming began so early. Before you could even form questions, before you could even choose. They called it education. They called it guidance, but in truth it was conditioning. They taught you to sit still, to silence your impulses, to ask permission before expressing your own needs. They trained your nervous system to obey before they ever filled your mind with words. And once your body had learned submission, they loaded your head with edited history, with sciences that mocked the unseen, with stories that glorified conformity and ridiculed rebellion. Be realistic, they told you. Follow the rules, respect authority. But these rules were not harmless. They were architecture, blueprints of a cage. And even though your parents, your teachers, the people who loved you most passed this script along, they did it not from cruelty but from ignorance. They too were caught in the same program, repeating it because it was all they had ever known. That is why you cannot live in blame. It was not their fault, and it was not yours. But the responsibility now belongs to you, because the instant you see the cage, the spell cracks. The moment you realize that much of your life has been scripted for you, choice returns. You see that you've been wearing costumes that never fit, chasing goals that were never yours, measuring your worth against rulers built by strangers. And in that realization, something ancient inside you stirs. A whisper becomes a roar. This is not all there is. That whisper is not fantasy. It is memory. It is the ancient code still alive in your DNA, waiting to be reactivated. It is the truth that civilizations long before ours understood and lived by. And no matter how much programming, no matter how many distractions, no matter how many invisible chains have been laid across your life, that truth has never died. It has only been buried. You are not small, you are not broken, you are not powerless. You are a spark of the infinite, carrying a divine presence that cannot be erased, only forgotten. And once you begin to remember, the game changes, the rules dissolve, and the system loses the one thing it depends on most: your unconscious agreement, how the cage was built. They didn't begin by filling your head with lies. They began with your body. Before you could question, before you could resist, they trained you to obey. Sit still, raise your hand, ask permission to meet your own needs. These small rituals of control seemed harmless, even educational, but they were not random. They were rehearsals. The nervous system was molded into submission so that when the stories came later, you would accept them without protest. Once your body had learned the posture of compliance, your mind was ready to receive the program. They fed you a rewritten history, stripped of mystery and spirit. They taught you a science that mocked the invisible, that called intuition fantasy, that insisted only the measurable could be real. They assigned you literature that praised conformity and ridiculed rebellion, drilling into you that the dreamers were fools and the rebels were dangerous. You were told, be realistic, respect authority, follow the rules, and you believed it, not because you were weak, but because you were open, trusting, and ready to learn. They knew this. That's why they came for you early. But these rules were not innocent lessons. They were the blueprint of your cage. Every phrase, every standard, every gold star for compliance was a brick in the walls. Even those who loved you most, parents, teachers, mentors, passed the script along. Not because they wished you harm, but because they too were trapped. They too had been taught to confuse obedience with morality, silence with safety, and productivity with worth. This is how control perpetuates itself, not through monsters, but through everyday rituals disguised as normal life. The cage was never physical. It was psychological. Bells in classrooms conditioned you like Pavlov's dogs. A sound, a signal, and you moved. Not because you chose to, but because you were trained to. That conditioning did not end at graduation. It simply changed shape. Now the bells are alarms. On your phone, email pings, and social media notifications. The constant alerts are not conveniences. They are chains disguised as reminders. They keep you reactive, externally focused, and rarely present. Even your celebrations became tools of control. Holidays that should have been sacred turned into rituals of debt, stress, and consumption. Christmas became consumerism masked as compassion. Valentine's Day turned love into a transaction. Halloween became a festival of masks, but the greatest mask was the performance of pretending it was all sacred. These were not organic traditions. They were engineered ceremonies, designed to keep you anchored to the script. Buy, conform, belong. Even. Language itself became a spell. Phrases like, "That's just how it is," or "You have to be realistic," were not neutral observations. They were agreements, small contracts that locked you deeper into the illusion. Every time you repeated them, you reinforced the cage, and because the cage was invisible, you mistook it for life itself. You thought you were free because you could choose between options that were already scripted. This is how control works best, not through violence, but through repetition. Not through chains, but through beliefs you never question. The system doesn't need to force you. It teaches you to police yourself. You learn what to hide to be accepted, what to perform to be rewarded, what to bury to be loved. Little by little you forget who you are under the costume. But here is the truth. The moment you see the cage, the illusion begins to collapse. The second you pause and ask, whose voice is this? Whose dream am I chasing? The system loses its grip. Awareness cracks the spell, and in that crack, light pours through. Choice returns. Suddenly, the walls that looked solid are revealed to be paper. The door you thought was locked was never locked at all. It only required your noticing. You cannot blame the ones who passed. The program to you. They were only repeating what was given to them. But now that you see, it is your responsibility. Because the cage survives only as long as you remain unconscious. The moment you wake, the structure begins to crumble. Ancient maps, modern amnesia. Long before modern systems taught you to mock what you cannot measure, ancient civilizations mapped the truth you've always felt beneath the surface. They didn't just theorize about the divine. They experienced it, embodied it, and left behind markers so future generations could remember when the fog grew thick. The Egyptians spoke of the Neteru, not gods in the sky, but living principles of divinity woven into every corner of existence. They carved the eye of Horus, the pine cone, the staff, not as decoration, but as reminders that divinity lived in everything including you. The Vedic sages of India called it Atman, the eternal self not separate from Brahman, the infinite field of consciousness. To them, individuality was a wave, and Brahman was the ocean. The wave was never apart from the sea, it only forgot its source. The Greeks whispered of the daemon, the inner guide, the divine genius animating every human life. The Gnostics preserved the truth of the spark, the fragment of the infinite trapped in matter, waiting to be remembered. These were not bedtime myths, they were blueprints, maps of consciousness. Warnings for those who would come after, but in the modern world, those maps were buried. They were rebranded as superstition, metaphor, or fairy tale. Why? Because if you knew they were literal, if you truly remembered that you were infinite, dressed in human form, the machinery of control would collapse overnight. If you remembered you were a creator and not a consumer, why would you chase approval? If you remembered you were consciousness itself, why would you fear authority? If you knew your essence could never be owned, why would you obey systems built to domesticate you? This is why the curriculum skipped over these truths. This is why mainstream narratives mock mysticism and glorify materialism. Because when people forget, they are easy to predict, easy to distract, easy to harvest. When they remember, they become wild cards. They stop pouring energy into a game they never chose. They stop measuring themselves by rulers built by strangers. They stop apologizing for their own light. Remembering isn't arrogance. It isn't about thinking you are above others. It is sobriety. It is waking up from the trance of forgetfulness and seeing things as they are. It is understanding that you are not just your name, your nationality, your gender, or your job. You are not the labels you've been trained to wear. You are the awareness behind them all. The quiet, unshakable presence that was here before. Those labels were written and will remain long after they fade. And once that presence takes the driver's seat, life reorganizes. The script loosens. You stop living like an actor lost in a role and begin living as the witness, the creator, the source behind the stage. You don't need to escape the world. You simply learn to walk through it differently. Less hypnotized. More awake. Less reactive. More sovereign. The maps of the ancients were never truly lost. They've always been here waiting in plain sight. You see them in the symbols carved into temples, in myths retold across continents, in whispers that cross cultures with uncanny similarity. The only reason they feel distant is because you were trained to doubt your own compass. You were told to look everywhere but within. And yet, the whisper remains. The signal persists. The code in your DNA still hums. The modern world calls it superstition, but you know better. It is memory, and memory, once awakened, cannot be silenced. The third eye and the war on perception. At the very center of your brain rests a tiny gland shaped like a pine cone. Ancient cultures revered it. Philosophers wrote about it. Mystics built entire traditions around it. Today, science calls it the pineal gland. The Egyptians carved it into their temples, the Hindus marked it as the Ajna chakra, and René Descartes himself named it the seat of the soul. Across civilizations, it was never treated as just another organ. It was seen as a portal, a bridge between the visible and invisible, a biological antenna designed to tune your consciousness beyond the limits of the five senses. Why would so? Many cultures across time emphasize the same small structure because they understood what modern systems deliberately conceal. Perception is power. When the pineal gland is open, your intuition sharpens, synchronicities increase, dreams become vivid, and inner guidance moves from guesswork to clarity. You begin to sense patterns that others dismiss, to feel the deeper rhythm beneath the noise of daily life. And a human being who perceives in this way cannot be controlled. They become sovereign. They stop feeding systems built on fear and start following an inner compass that cannot be bought or bribed. This is why, in today's world, the pineal gland is under attack, not with swords or shackles, but with subtlety. Fluoride in the water, glyphosate in the food, microplastics in the blood, heavy metals in the air. All of these are not accidents. They accumulate in the body, calcify the pineal gland, and dull perception. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's documented, peer-reviewed, and quietly ignored. Because to acknowledge it would mean admitting there is a silent war being waged on your awareness. Think about it. When your pineal gland is calcified, you don't just sleep poorly, you see poorly. You no longer notice the whispers, the nudges, the meaningful alignments life places in your path. You no longer feel the pull of something greater. The channel between your ego and your essence fills with static. And in that static, the system thrives. Because when you can't hear your own inner voice, you're forced to depend on theirs. That's why toothpaste is filled with chemicals that deaden sensitivity while claiming to protect. That's why food is designed to be addictive rather than nourishing. That's why the modern environment is flooded with neurotoxins and endocrine disruptors. It's not just about health, it's about perception. It's about making sure you stay too foggy, too numb, too distracted to question the narrative. You think you're choosing breakfast cereal, but you're choosing between brands of sedation. You think you're watching entertainment, but you're absorbing programming that keeps you in the loop. And yet, even with decades of assault, the signal has never gone silent. Even through the fog, you felt it. Those flashes of intuition, those moments of déjà vu, those uncanny alignments that make you stop and wonder. That is your third eye fighting to open. It is not dead, only dormant. And the very fact that so much effort is spent attacking it is proof of how important it truly is. Reclaiming it doesn't require blind belief. It requires intention. Start by removing the poisons designed to block it. Clean water, clean food, clean air where possible. Then add practices that stimulate and awaken it. Meditation, breathwork, sunlight at dawn, time in silence, intentional fasting, honest self-reflection. These are not empty rituals. They are signal hygiene. They tune the antenna back to its natural frequency. When the pineal begins to clear, your perception transforms. Dreams become messages, not random noise. Intuition becomes guidance, not superstition. Synchronicities become confirmations, not coincidences. Life itself begins to communicate with you in symbols, patterns, and timing. The fog lifts. For the first time, you start to see reality not as it was sold to you, but as it is, raw, vast, and alive. You don't need psychedelics or extreme rituals to touch this state. You need clarity, discipline, and a hunger for truth greater than your hunger for comfort, because awakening is not easy. It requires unlearning everything you were taught about what's real and what's possible. But once the veil lifts, you cannot return. You will never again mistake the cage for home. Your third eye is not decoration, it is the gateway. And once it opens, the system that thrived on your blindness begins to crumble. Body as temple, breath as technology. Your body is not a burden. It is not a machine you drag through life until it breaks. It is not simply flesh and bone to be punished, decorated, or ignored. Your body is a temple. It is a living instrument, an intelligent vessel designed for perception beyond the five senses. Every tradition that truly sought awakening understood this. The body was never seen as the enemy of the spirit. It was the channel, the grounding, the bridge between the infinite and the finite. And yet, from the moment you entered the system, you were taught the opposite. You were told the body is weak, sinful, mechanical, flawed. You were taught to push it, numb it, starve it, overfeed it, medicate it, but never to honor it. Why? Because a body that is inflamed, sluggish, and disconnected is much easier to control. If they keep your biology slow, they don't need to silence your thoughts. The fog in your mind will rise naturally from the fog in your cells. Look closely. Your gut produces more neurotransmitters than your brain. It is your second brain, regulating mood, energy, and even your receptivity to subtle perception. And what does the modern system attack relentlessly? Your gut. Processed foods, pesticides, antibiotics, preservatives, all of them destroy the microbiome that keeps you balanced. When the gut is compromised, your thoughts become cloudy. Your Emotions unstable, your spirit harder to hear. You think you're just tired, anxious, or unfocused, but often it is biological sabotage. The same is true for your water, your air, your light. Tap water filled with endocrine disruptors, air saturated with industrial toxins, artificial light. That scrambles your circadian rhythm, all disguised as normal life. And when your body begins to break under the weight of this assault, the solution offered is never healing. It is medication, more chemicals, more dependency, more fog. You're handed diagnoses, not answers. You're given pills, not practices. Because chaos is profitable, clarity is not. But here's the truth. Healing your body is not just wellness. It is rebellion. It is spiritual war at the cellular level. Every meal, every breath, every moment of rest becomes a vote for awakening or a vote for suppression. The system thrives when you outsource your health, when you believe you are powerless, when you hand over your body to industries built on keeping you sick. But the body itself has never forgotten. It is always moving toward balance, always recalibrating, always communicating with you, if you would only listen. And the most direct key to this communication has been with you all along: your breath. Breath is not just oxygen intake. Breath is code. Breath is energy. Every inhale draws in life force. Every exhale releases what no longer serves. The ancients knew this. In Vedic tradition, breath was prana, the bridge between the physical and the subtle. Taoist alchemists moved qi through the body with it. Hermetic teachings saw it as the rhythm of spirit animating matter. Modern life trained you to forget. Shallow breaths, fast breaths, stress breaths. Chest tight, diaphragm unused, lungs never fully opened. A body stuck in survival mode cannot perceive the divine. It cannot settle into presence. And yet, with just a few conscious breaths, everything changes. Energy begins to move. Static begins to clear. The fog lifts. Breathwork is not just relaxation. It is technology. It is detox. It is alignment. Energy, trauma, and the flow of spirit. Your body is not only flesh, it is energy condensed into form. Every nerve impulse, every heartbeat, every breath is a current of frequency. Ancient traditions mapped this reality with names like chakras, meridians, and auric fields. These were not fantasies of mystics. They were diagrams of how life force flows through you. And just like rivers can be blocked, your energy can be dammed. Trauma does not simply vanish with time. Fear does not dissolve just because you ignore. Anger buried alive does not die. It settles in the tissues, in the breath, in the subtle field around you. This is why you sometimes feel heavy without cause, anxious without reason, blocked without explanation. The energy of old wounds is still circulating, distorting your perception, limiting your awareness. When energy cannot move freely, consciousness cannot move freely. You mistake fog for fatigue, anxiety for identity, numbness for normality. But, in truth, much of what people call just life is simply congestion in the system. And this is where the ancients gave us tools: breath, movement, sound, silence. Conscious practices that reopen the channels, clear the static, and return the body to flow. Breathwork is one of the simplest and most powerful. With rhythm and awareness, the breath becomes fire. It stirs what has been dormant, flushing out emotions long buried. At first, this may not feel spiritual at all. It may feel messy, overwhelming, even raw. Grief surfaces, rage rises, ecstasy floods in. But this is the true cleansing, not bypassing pain with pretty words, but facing what the system trained you to hide. And when the pathway's clear, something ancient awakens. At the base of your spine lies a coiled intelligence the yogis called Kundalini. This is not metaphor. It is electric, alive, creative power itself. Once stirred, it rises through the body, reconnecting the lower with the higher, the physical with the divine. It does not need permission. It only needs space and your willingness to feel. This is not entertainment. It is not performance. It is reclamation. Releasing what never belonged, remembering what always did. When the current flows again, your perception expands, your intuition sharpens, and your life begins to align not with programming but with presence. Culture as a trance. Most people don't realize it, but they are living inside a trance. Not a stage show hypnosis, but a cultural hypnosis so deep it feels like reality itself. Wake up, scroll, consume, react, sleep, repeat. The rhythm is rehearsed until it becomes invisible. You think you're choosing freely, but you're acting out a script written long before you arrived. And the most dangerous part? It all looks normal. Culture is the delivery system for programming. Every tradition, holiday, and routine was shaped with purpose. The school bell wasn't just a time signal, it was conditioning. Pavlov rang a bell and dogs salivated. Your bell rang, and you moved without thinking. Today the bells are alarms, emails, notifications. You don't choose to respond, you are trained to. Even your celebrations have been hijacked. Christmas became consumption in disguise. Valentine's Day turned love into a market. Halloween is a festival of masks, but the biggest mask is pretending. Doll still feels sacred. These rituals aren't about joy or connection. They are about keeping you distracted, busy, and bound to the script. Buy, conform, belong. Language is part of the spell. Phrases like, "That's just life," or "Be realistic" sound harmless, but they are incantations. Every time you repeat them, you reinforce invisible walls. You agree to the limits without ever noticing you agreed. The cage becomes self-policed, because you no longer need external chains when your own voice repeats the programming. But the trance only works when you don't know it's a trance. The moment you notice, the illusion begins to crack. You can still participate in culture, but from presence, not autopilot. You can show up without being hypnotized, and that subtle shift is what the system fears most. Not rebellion, not resistance, but awareness. Because when you stop performing for invisible judges, when you stop seeking approval through rituals that drain your soul, you reclaim something they cannot sell, your presence. The spiritual battlefield. You are not simply living in a broken system, you are living in a battlefield. Not one fought with tanks or bombs, but with frequencies, thoughts, and emotions. Ancient Gnostic texts warned of archons, non-physical forces that thrive on fear, chaos, and division. They don't need to appear as monsters. They don't need to wear crowns. They influence through systems, through whispers in the collective mind, through the emotions that drain your light. Have you ever noticed how doubt rises exactly when you begin to speak your truth? How fear appears the moment you decide to step outside the script? That sudden anxiety that tells you to shrink, to conform, to be quiet. Where does it really come from? Not all of it is yours. Consciousness is not local. Just like a radio can pick up interference, your mind can pick up signals that are not your own. And low vibration entities feed on exactly that interference. Fear, shame, guilt, division, these are their food. And what keeps humanity looping in these states? Systems built to deliver them. Media floods your senses with tragedy and outrage, not to inform you, but to keep you reactive. Religion preaches fear of damnation while offering salvation from a God outside yourself. Education punishes imagination and rewards memorization. These aren't glitches. They are design. The archonic forces don't command directly. They architect influence. They whisper into the minds of leaders, shaping policies, institutions, and distractions that keep the population too exhausted and overstimulated to notice the truth. They don't want humans who meditate, breathe deeply, question everything, and remember their divine origin. They want a species too tired to care, too distracted to notice, too divided to unite. And yet, awareness breaks their grip. When you observe fear without feeding it, when you notice doubt without believing it, their power dissolves. They cannot thrive without your unconscious participation. Their greatest weapon is convincing you they don't exist, while they operate through every unhealed fear. But once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. That clarity becomes your shield. Presence becomes your sword, and you shift from being a target to being a transmitter, radiating truth instead of leaking energy. Through fear, the masks of identity. You were born as pure awareness, formless, limitless, beyond definition. But layer by layer, a mask was built around that awareness. A name, a nationality, a religion, a personality. Piece by piece, they told you this is who you are, and you believed it, not because you were naive, but because they began before. You knew what belief even was. The system thrives when you confuse the mask for the self. When you believe your worth is measured by productivity. When you chase roles, student, worker, citizen, influencer, thinking they are reality instead of performance. The more invested you are in the mask, the easier you are to manipulate. Because masks can be rewarded, punished, bought, and sold. Presence cannot. Questioning your identity feels like death because in a way it is. The false self resists exposure. It wants to keep playing the game, seeking validation, avoiding rejection, clinging to roles that win approval. But awakening begins the moment you ask not, "Who am I?" but "What am I?" Because behind every thought, every role, every emotion, there is a silent presence, unmoving, untouched, watching. That presence is you. The system pushes you into constant self-definition. Build your brand, curate your profile, reinforce your narrative daily, but all of this is distraction. Because as long as you are chasing identities, you will never stop to notice the one who wears them. And that noticing is what the system fears. Most, every role you've played, student, parent, employee, rebel, was useful for survival. But none of them are the truth. They are costumes in a dream. And when you begin to let the mask fall, something terrifying and beautiful happens. What remains is raw presence. Not polished, not performative, just real. This is why so many feel exhausted without knowing why. It's not only the job or the schedule, it's the endless effort of maintaining masks that were never yours. Every social interaction becomes rehearsal. Every relationship becomes negotiation. And in the background, your soul grows restless. Not dead, just buried, waiting. The true awakening is not about becoming better. It is about becoming real. Letting the mask dissolve and remembering that you were never the role. You were always the awareness behind it. The final remembering. Awakening is not about escape. It is about remembering. You are not a role, a story, or a mask. You are the awareness behind it all, the eternal presence choosing to live a temporary human life. Every system that tried to shrink you, every belief that taught you to obey, every distraction that kept you asleep, none of it could erase the truth. The God within you has always been here, waiting for this moment of recognition. Now is the time to stop playing small, to stop confusing performance with reality, to live as the divine spark you've always been. The world doesn't need more theories. It needs people who embody truth, who radiate presence, who remember who they are. That is you. That has always been you. If this message awakened something inside you, don't stay silent. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who's ready to remember. Together, we awaken the mind.